Okay, so today we're going to be talking about The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. If you don't know, this is my favorite series. I love it so much. I've read this book a few times now. I just finished my most recent reread, and it was so wonderful to be back in this story again. So for this review, I'm going to be giving you, it's all spoiler filled, so if you haven't read this book yet, this isn't the video for you. But if you have read it, please hang out with me. Let's chat about this amazing, amazing, amazing story. So at the beginning of this video, I'm going to just kind of be discussing general things that I love about this book, as well as some things that throughout this video, we'll also talk about the stuff that doesn't work perfectly for me, but for the most part, this is going to be a nonstop gush. And then after we talk about like general awesome stuff about the story, we'll get into some of my favorite scenes, just chatting. So this is gonna be a spoiler-filled review. I'm gonna be talking about this entire book, but I'm only gonna be talking about the first book. I have read all 3 books that are out right now, but I will not give any spoilers for books 2 or 3. I'm only gonna be talking about the knowledge that we have of book 1. So those of you who have read the other books, if you catch me saying something that sounds like, what, but that's not true. We know that because of book 2. It's because I'm only speaking according to the knowledge that I have of book 1. So I'm only responding to the things that we learn here so that anybody that's hanging out and reading the story with me can participate in this video. Where to begin? Man, I love Scott Lynch's storytelling. I love his prose. I love his structuring. I love his characters. I love his world. This book just feels just right for me. It is a really unique book and a really unique storytelling style, so I get why it doesn't work for so many people, but man, oh man, does it work for me. I think that Scott Lynch has such an immersive world building, immersive storytelling. I love that this place, that this world, this city that they're in feels like Florence, Italy, but the deeper you get, the more unique it is and the more you see how completely its own it is. Scott Lynch has a really, really, really descriptive writing style, and it doesn't bother me. Typically, if an author decides to be this descriptive, I feel like, all right, we could get on with it. I don't need to know what every statue looks like. But I'm so enamored by this setting that I do want that. I want all the visuals. I want to see everything. I want to experience it all. I love his prose. I adore Scott Lynch's prose. It's so unique to him. He has such stylistic prose, and I would almost go so far as to say indulgent prose, which normally would be an insult from me, but it works. It fits the story just right. It fits these characters just right. And I find myself just sinking into it, and all it does for me is add to the atmosphere and add to the immersion of the story that much more. Oh, hey, this is what I was looking for. I'm just gonna read a little passage, a little bit of it to illustrate why I think the prose is great, which, if you're here, you've read it, so what do you care? This is when Bug is trying to provide a distraction for the gentleman bastards. And then Don Salvara's money might as well have been on the bloody moons for all that the gentleman bastards could get their hands on it. No, prudence was out. Bug had to win. The presence of that rubbish pile made a great and glorious stupidity very possible. He was in the air before another thought crossed his mind. Arms out, falling backwards, staring up into the hot, near-moon sky with the confident assurance of all 12 of his years that death and injury were things reserved solely for people that weren't Bug. He screamed as he fell in wild exultation, just to be sure that he had the foot patrol's unwavering attention. It's just so... The way that he describes things with the confident assurance of all 12 of his years that death and injury were things reserved solely for people that weren't Bug. It's so extravagant, but it fits this world and these characters so well, and it's so beautiful. I think his prose is so beautiful, and it helps me to just sink into the story that much more. I love the humor of this story. the things that the characters say, the way that Father Chain speaks to them, the way that they speak to each other, the roundabout, silly half insults that they give to people without people realizing, cracks me up. I laugh out loud so many times reading these books, just burst out laughing while I'm reading, because this dark, gritty, sour humor is perfect for me. I mean, it fits me so well. It fits these characters so well. I eat it up. I also love the storytelling, the structure of this story. Sorry, I'm flipping through the book just to see what scenes I've annotated and want to talk about. I find that Scott Lynch's storytelling style can be really hard to get used to, especially with the jumping back and forth between present time and past without really strong indications of, is this next little chunk going to be now or then, and you just have to keep reading to find out. And sometimes we get interrupted in the middle of something that we'd like to see through, but now we're just thrown into a flashback. And I remember the first time I read this book, I found that very jarring and frustrating for a while, until I realized that they're all connected, and realized that the flashbacks, whatever we're seeing here, it's gonna connect to something in the present. And I got to where now it didn't matter if the flashback was interrupting action. As soon as we got into a flashback, I was so excited to see, okay, how is this going to fit into the present timeline? What relevancy is it going to have? You know, it wasn't just lazy character building or lazy world building. It was all so intentional. And really, I feel that way about this entire book. I think that especially when you get to the end and things start connecting and coming together and it all starts fitting together, intentionality in storytelling is one of my favorite things to read when I get to the end of a story, and then I can look back at all the little pieces and I can say, oh, all those little things, they were intentional so that I could have this moment right here where it all just fits together. And I find that such a rewarding reading experience, and that's what I get from these stories. It just, once I get to the end and it all just comes together in this beautiful cinematic way. It's so satisfying. It's so satisfying to read. And really, I would say that for this entire book, I think that one thing that I love so much about Lynch's writing is that he doesn't follow some typical story structure. You know, he's not following the 3-act structure. He's not following any of those kind of guidelines that you see a lot of books following. There's so many things that Lynch does that's just really unique to him. And I think that's part of what makes this book feel so fresh and so unique and so captivating to me, because I genuinely don't know what's going to happen next. I genuinely don't know what direction the story is going to go in, or how things are going to play out. I mean, even my main character, when he's stuck in a barrel of horse piss, I genuinely don't know if he's going to die, because this story is so unpredictable in the way Lynch chooses to write it. I also love that this is a magical world. This is a world where magic exists, and magic is a genuine threat to the people and to the story. Like, it's terrifying. Magic is terrifying depending on the hands that is wielding the magic. And in this world, it's a pretty dark world. We really don't know that many good guys, so it's scary. Like, magic is an intense force. And I love that we're in this magic world with really interesting magic, by the way. But we're not following magic users. We're following normies. We're following your average group of swindlers and thieves and ne'er-do-wells who don't have the ability of magic. They might employ someone, they might hire someone, or purchase something that they can use magic, but they themselves aren't magic wielders. And I think that's such a fascinating perspective to follow, and it's not one that we really get in fantasy stories very much, where the world magic exists in the world, but that's just not the focus of the story. The main character isn't trying to go up in the ranks of magic using, and they're not trying to master magic. They're not trying to understand magic. Magic kind of just exists in this world, and sometimes we have to engage with it and sometimes we don't. And I think that that's a really interesting perspective to read a fantasy novel from. Like, I rarely get this. Just generally the setup and everything. I mean, the setting, the characters, the way Lynch chose to tell the story, it works for me. Nearly everything about this story, I sink into and I eat it up, and it fits me so well. I also really, really, really love these characters. I think Lynch does an excellent job of making these very not good guys totally, I mean, like, they're not evil or anything, but you know, they're not trying to do well by the world. They're just trying to get what they're after. Anyway, let's get into some more specific stuff. I love these characters so much. I adore them. I love all the Gentlemen Bastards. I know that a lot of people say that Kahlo and Galdo are a little bit harder to connect with because they're kind of just like your baseline comedic relief, which I actually do agree with a lot. They do. They're comedic relief. They don't have that much depth to them, but the funny twins, you know, it's a character type that I really like, so I love them. Bug is, of course, adorable and sweet and wonderful, and you want to protect him with your life. And Locke and Jean are really easy to love because they're best friends. They'll do anything for each other. They love each other on such a deep level, and they're, again, funny and wonderful to follow. And, you know, I think that Locke is a wonderful protagonist. My brother thinks that he's too whiny. I can't agree with that one. But also Father Chains. I'm gonna focus on Father Chains for a second because Father Chains is a character that I love so much. He's just like the rest of them. He's a swindler, he's a thief. In fact, he's training them up to be just that. He's not a good guy, but he, as much as you can be in this world, he cares for them so well. I love in the beginning of the book, I do think that the pacing, I guess that's one thing that I'll say that isn't perfect about the story. I don't think the pacing is perfect. I do think that Lynch could tighten this story up, especially at the beginning. The past perspective, the past timeline, I think is just riveting. I adore it. But the present timeline could really use some tightening there in the first 200 pages. And there are other sections of the book that I think could be tightened up as well. I personally don't mind because I love hanging out with these characters. I think this world is fascinating and I love spending time in it. And I just eat the story up. So even the slow parts, it doesn't take me long to just consume it. But anyway, Father Chains, I love him in the beginning flashbacks when we get to see Locke first joining them and getting to see the chaos that is Locke as a kid, see his really raw beginnings and his raw skill that desperately needs honing if he's ever going to survive. We see Chains learn Locke's story and then tell him, okay, now let me tell you what you did wrong. Now let me tell you where you failed here so that you don't make these mistakes again. We get to see through Kahlo and Galdo how he trains them and how much he's invested in them and all that they're learning. And then he immediately takes in Locke and starts teaching him how to set a table and proper table manners. And we see that his training is really, really intentional in that you're going to learn accenting, you're going to learn to sit at a table, you're going to learn how to do this stuff so that when you need to do it for a job, no one will question you. And I mean, it's not like he's training him for something good, so it's not necessarily something noble that he's doing here, but I do love the intentionality of it. I love how he takes them in and really genuinely cares for them, you know, like he wants Locke to take a few days to eat well and to rest well before he's going to start quizzing him and training him. And you see a lot of care despite the fact that it's care so that you can do bad things. But also just his brutal honesty. He does not hold back with these kids. He absolutely calls them out when they're dum-dums. Enter Lamora, waving the idiot flag and thinking himself so clever, so much cleverer than the rest of the world. harsh, brutally honest, but you know, like that's what Locke needs in this moment. He needs to be smacked upside the head and be told, you may have raw skill, but you're not near as smart as you need to be to survive this world. Do you see what consequences really are? Why you have to move slowly, think ahead, control the situation, why you need to settle down and wait for time to give you sense to match your talent for mischief? And then after he knocks him upside the head with sense and forces humility on him, he then goes on to tell him, you're going to pay the death offering. You're going to pay the death offering for each of these people that you are responsible for the deaths of. Locke tries to say, no, they were my friends. And he says, of course they were your friends, Locke. They were your very good friends because they're going to teach you that when you kill someone, there are consequences. It's one thing to kill in a duel, to kill in self-defense, to kill for vengeance. It's another thing entirely to kill simply because you are careless. And then just a few lines down. And the price of your life with me is that you must show respect for the dead. Those boys and girls are your victims, Locke. Get that through your head. This is something you owe them before the gods. Something you must swear to by blood before you can stay. I love it. I love it so much. I love these little glimpses into how intentional and intense Chain was of making sure that the kids' every skill is honed and that they have a level of care and respect and thoughtfulness. And I love seeing what went into him to make him who he is, the great Locke Lamora that we know today. Oh, also just like a little thing about Chains. I love this line when he talks about something that he did to someone he was irritated with. I was a bit upset with him, so I lifted his chairs, his carpets, and tapestries, and all of his clothes right off the ship. I left the money. I was making a point. It's just like the humor in this, it's too good. It's too good. Okay, I'll quit talking about Chain soon, I promise, but I just want to also mention I love Jean's beginning because I love seeing Chains who once again takes him in, cares for him, defends him when Locke is a little brat when Jean first joins, and just so good. I love seeing their beginning because it's so messy. It's so not what you would expect between such loyal friends, but also because once again it just really showcases Chain's, I don't know, protectiveness over these kids. So I love when Locke is a fool and insults and then later realizes that Jean only lost his parents 5 days ago, and Locke says, oh, I didn't know, and Chain says, well then, when you don't know everything you could know, it's a fine time to shut your noisemaker and be polite. And then he puts them through this challenge with the box that Locke is clearly not nearly as good at as Jean, and then he intentionally changes the rules so that Jean gets dinner and Locke doesn't. And it's his way of punishing him for being such a brat. He says, ridiculous, isn't it? You've been putting on airs recently, my dear boy. You've reached a certain age when many boys seem to just sort of fold up their better judgment and set it aside for a few years. Anyhow, it seems to me that your nose is tilting a little high in the air for someone with a death mark around his throat. And it just goes on and on. He really lays into him. Lets everybody eat but Locke, and then Father Chains poured all their usual prayer toast, dedicating the last to Jean Tenon, who lost his family but came to another soon enough. Then from there we get to see Locke steal some spectacles for Jean. They don't work out, but then they kind of they make up this deal where Locke is going to teach Jean to steal, and Jean is going to teach Locke how to use the box a bit better. And it's the beginnings of their friendship. This is my cat, by the way, who I named Locke after Locke Lamora. We get to see the beginnings of their friendship. We get to see the fierce protectiveness that is Chains, and I just love seeing their beginnings. I love seeing what molded them into what they are today. Anyway, let's get into the present timeline. I think I've spent enough time in the past. Present timeline is also excellent. Like I said earlier in the review, I do think that the pacing is a little bit messy. It's not messy, but it could be tightened up. It doesn't bother me, but it could be tightened up, especially there at the beginning. Most of the tightening up, I'd say, could happen in the present timeline. I really think that the past is pretty perfect. But of course, the present timeline is still phenomenal, especially in the second half of the book. The things that they pull off, the shenanigans that they get into and get away with, is so much fun to read. There's so many things that they get away with just through their quick thinking, their quick tongue, their sleight of hand. They're so clever. This group of boys are so smart, and their ability to think through situations and to slide it through the cracks of things, impersonations, their disguises, their humor. That one bit where Locke dresses up and he says, I have a terrible case of not being entirely, or a terrible case of being imaginary. I love watching them pull off these shenanigans. I love watching them come across a problem and think through it and be able to find ways to lie and steal and seep into the fringes, to seep into the places that they shouldn't be. I think that they're so ridiculously clever, and it's so fun to watch them sort through their problems and work together and be so loyal to one another. But there are also many things that they don't do well. There are so many times where their plans do not pan out. And I really love that about this book. I really, really love that they are able to, that they're in this world where they're not the smartest, they're not the cleverest, they're not the strongest, they're not the most able, and they're playing a really dangerous game, and that comes back to bite them. Sometimes it comes back to bite them, and then they can turn around and think their way through it and think their way around it, and that's really satisfying to read. Sometimes they absolutely cannot, and sometimes there are just people smarter than them and stronger than them in this world, and it makes for really high stakes, and it makes for really, really, really high consequences. And I think that that's necessary for a story as dark as this one, for a story as brutal as this one, for a world as brutal as this one. And for characters that are playing such risky games, we have to have such big consequences. And I think it's wonderful that Lynch didn't hold back. The scene where Locke, after everything they've been through and after all the mistakes they've made and after all the reasons not to keep going, and Locke decides, no, keep going. We can still finish this out. We can still do it. And they follow him. And when Locke walks in on Kahlo and Galdo on the floor with their throats slit from ear to ear, matching wounds, as she put it, as the spider put it, it's hard. It's so hard to read because I'm so attached to this crew. I love them so much. And the reality of the fact that they could have walked away, but Locke pushed too hard, and the brutal, brutal consequences that come with that. Let me see if I can find it. Kahlo and Galdo lay beside it, on their backs, staring up at the semi-darkness, their throats slashed from ear to ear, a pair of smooth gashes, identical twin wounds. And then down goes Jean. A severed hand, gray and dried and leathery, and it has his name on it. Things I could do if I could stitch your true name. And then when Locke tells Bug, back off, don't go. But Bug says, I'm a gentleman bastard, Bug said, slowly and angrily. Nobody messes with us. Nobody gets the best of us. You're going to pay. And then the crossbow gets him in the neck. A bolt that was meant to catch Bug between the eyes took him in the neck instead. Forgive me, Locke mumbled through his tears. Bug, this is my fault. We could have run. We should have. I pried. You and Kahlo and Galdo. The bolt should have been for me. Your pride, the boy whispered. Justified. Gentleman bastard. Am I not a second? Not apprentice? Real gentleman bastard? You were never second, Bug. You were never an apprentice. Locke sobbed, tried to brush the boy's hair back, and was aghast at the bloody handprint he left on Bug's pale forehead. You brave, stupid little bastard. This is my fault. Bug, please, please say this is all my fault. No, whispered Bug. It hurts. It hurts so much. The boy's breathing stopped while Locke held him. He said nothing more. This scene, the pain of this scene, the sheer emotion of this scene followed by Locke's rage. I think that Lynch does such a good job and not only following through with the reality of what this kind of world and what these kinds of shenanigans with these kinds of risks would really pan out to be, but I also think that he does such a good job at writing the reactions, at writing the fierce anger and the deep desire for revenge, as well as the pain. No spoilers going forward, but we're not done mourning them. And I think that in this book, as well as in future books, Lynch is so good at really encompassing that emotion that comes with this kind of stuff. I will say, speaking of this, I guess for my preferences, I'm not saying that Lynch did anything wrong, but for my preferences, I do think that it was a bit of a mistake for myself to kill Kahlo and Galdo and Bug all in this book, and Chains technically, but you know, different context, because we have a cast of characters that we ideally very much care about, and we spend a good amount of time with them, and then the book's not even, I mean, we still have a lot of the book left to go, and as well as a lot of books, and yet we've killed off such a massive part of our cast. Now, obviously, we can add to that cast. We can meet new people. We can gain new attachments. But it is one thing that I think Lynch does amazingly is not following a typical structure and therefore being totally unpredictable and therefore making the story feel really fresh and really new. So I can't really fault him for doing something as big as killing off this massive amount of our small cast. So I can't fault him at that, because I love that he takes these risks, and I love that he does what feels right for the moment, what feels right for the story, instead of withholding. But at the same time, I do think that maybe just killing the twins and keeping Bug into the next book, or maybe killing one twin and Bug and bringing the other twin into the next book so that we could also explore like the pain and devastation of losing basically one half of yourself, you know, that twin connection, that twin bond, losing one, and then we would get more depth into one of the twins, because yes, the twins are a bit surface level in their character depth that we get in this book. We could get more depth into them and into one of them, and then we could also explore that very unique type of grief. I think that it would be really, really good if we could have kept just one of them. I think that it would, I think I would have preferred it. But I can't fault him for doing something this big, because I love that he just goes for it. I love that he isn't trying to do something expected, that I don't know, I think this entire story is completely uniquely his, so I can't fault him when he does something that is very, very shocking. Because I do think that it fits. I think that it fits. I think that it works with the story, so I can't be mad at him about it. Okay, I'll also talk about one thing that I really, really love about these flashbacks. Not only that they're relevant for the present timeline, that maybe we'll get a piece of information that's now essential for us to know in the present timeline, or maybe we'll get you know, a parallel scene that we're gonna play off of in a present timeline, stuff like that. I love that so much, that he utilizes these flashbacks so well. I think my favorite one, and I've saved it for this point, because my favorite one is the parallel that we get in the final battle. I think that the final battle between Locke and the Grey King is so good. It's so satisfying. But then when you tie it into one of my favorite flashbacks, it's that much more satisfying. I don't have to fight you and I don't have to run, he grinned wildly. I just have to keep you here until Jean gets back. Tesso gasped and looked around. Out of the shifting market, one small cocoa shell boat was heading straight toward them. The plump shape of Jean Tenon was clearly visible within it, hauling rapidly on the oars. Let me go, let me go, let me go! Tesso punched with a series of punches. Locke was pummeled in the eyes and the nose and the scalp. Soon enough, he was bleeding from his nose, his lips, his ears, and somewhere under his hair. Tesso was pounding him, but good. Yet he continued to cling madly to the older boy. His head was whirling with a combination of pain and triumph. Locke actually started laughing, high and gleeful, and perhaps a little bit mad. I don't have to fight or run, he cackled. I changed the rules of the game. I just have to keep you here, until Jean gets back. That scene alone is brilliant. Couple it with the parallel of the fight with the Grey King. I don't have to beat you, Locke whispered, grinning madly up at the Grey King, his face streaked with blood and tears, his nose broken and his lips cracked, his vision swimming and edged with blackness. I don't have to beat you. I just have to keep you here until Jean shows up. And then we have a very, very similar scene of Locke being beaten, bloodied. And he says, "There he is!" Locke yelled, spraying blood across the front of the Grey King's shirt. "Jean, help me!" The Grey King whirled, dragging Locke halfway around him, whirled in fear of Jean Tenon before he realized that Locke must be lying. Whirled for just the half second that Locke would have begged from any god that would hear his prayer. Whirled for the half second that was worth Locke's entire life. And that, of course, was the amount of time that Locke needed to unsheath his dagger and stab him. But Locke held fast, and in an impossibly calm voice he whispered, "Kalo Sansa, my brother and my friend." Talks about their grapple, their struggle. And then it says, Locke's voice rose as he worked the knife further in. "Galdo, Sansa, my brother and my friend." More tussling, more fighting. "Bug," Locke whispered. His real name was Bertolin Gaddick, my apprentice, my brother, and my friend. His strength failed, and he slid down over the Grey King's corpse. My friend. He lay atop the corpse of his greatest enemy and bawled like a baby, adding salt water to the warm blood that covered the body of the Grey King. He lay there, shaking in the light of the red lamps, in a silent hall, alone with his triumph, unable to move and bleeding to death. Then you get Jean walking up on the scene, Locke telling him to leave him, and Jean's absolute anger at even the suggestion of leaving Locke behind. And you guys, it was such a satisfying ending. It was such a satisfying ending. It's such a satisfying story, filled with so many moments of extreme intensity, of moments where I'm on the edge of my seat, of excitement, of humor, where I'm laughing out loud, of absolute pain. I love this story so much. And you know what? I actually think that I like book 2 even more than book 1, so I just can't wait to dive into the reread of that and be able to chat with you guys about that. I don't know. I mean, half of this review is just me reading passages of the book to you, but I feel like that's the only way that I can really articulate how great this story is, because the story speaks for itself. This book is near perfect to me, you know? I mean, between the incredible world, the very immersive prose, the wonderful, wonderful characters, the hilarious humor, and the fun and exciting yet so high consequence plot is just wonderful. I love reading it. I think I've read this 3 or 4 times now. I love reading it every single time. I just have such a wonderful, wonderful time with it. I'd love to continue chatting with you about this if this is a story that you enjoy or you want to chat with me about as well. Please do leave your favorite scene or line if you have one that I didn't mention in this video. I'd love to chat with you more about it in the comments. I know that this was mostly, almost exclusively a gush, but that's just how I feel about the book, almost exclusively a gush. So if you hung out with me this long, thanks for chilling with me. I hope that you'll hang out a little bit longer and chat with me in the comments. I post videos every Tuesday through Friday. I'll see you again soon. Bye.